on the campaign theme, someone asks, please play devil's advocate for a minute. What weaknesses in Obama's campaign can the Romney camp possibly capitalize on?
Well, what was the central theme of the Romney campaign since the primaries? But they've been distracted by all sorts of things, many distractions produced by themselves. And that is the basic fact that the economy is still not in good shape. It's been 3.5 years, and although you can make an argument that the president's made it better, and I think a fairly convincing argument, he hasn't made it good enough. That's the argument. And Governor Romney, because of his business experience, knows how to do that and will be a much more effective person. But if basically the argument comes down to, look, if it's not working, what do you got to lose but trying someone new? And that's still their strongest argument, and that's still an argument that Governor Romney has to press at the debates. But the problem with that argument is Governor Romney has to be more specific in spelling out what his alternative would be. If there was a plausible alternative that made sense to the American people, I think Governor Romney can make headway on that issue. But right now, the only thing that he's offered is adherence to the Paul Ryan budget, which increases the deficit by $7 trillion, $5 billion on the tax side with new tax cuts, $2 trillion in increasing military spending at a time when Bob Gates, the Republican Secretary of Defense, certainly a hawk, suggests the military budget could be cut by $80 billion a year. Where are we going to get that $7 trillion from? How is that going to cause an economic revival? It just doesn't make sense. He has to spell it out much more clearly and much more persuasively. If he does that, then I think we'll have a good debate.
One issue making the headlines across the state right now is the decline in the PSA scores. There's been evidence now of cheating, and some critics say it's because of budget cuts in the Department of Education. To what would you attribute the decline in scores?
Well, it's certainly not cheating. The evidence of cheating is minuscule compared to the number of schools that have declined in performance. I think, look, you've all heard me say this, and it was one of the hallmarks of my 8 years as governor. I think funding matters. As long as that funding is directed at things where the science of education teaches us those things have a marked positive effect. And it matters whether kids go to full-day kindergarten or not. Every scientific study has proven that. It matters whether kids get a quality pre-K education. And pre-K counts was cited by the president and many other people as the best pre-kindergarten program in the country. And we have the great Harriet Dichter to thank for that, who's now working for Governor Markell in Delaware. Those things make a difference. The after-school tutoring programs make a difference. And those all cost money. They cost money. You have full-day kindergarten, obviously. You've got to have teachers and teachers' aides in the classrooms for a full day rather than a half day. It costs money. Pre-K, where no pre-K exists, costs money. Smaller class sizes cost money. After-school tutoring costs money. Technology in the schools costs money. Teacher training costs money. But each and every one of those things that I've just rattled off, the science of education says make a definitive difference in performance. And when you look at what we did, and again, I know you got, the press got tired of me saying this in 2010, but the Education Research Council, a nonpartisan think tank in Washington, found that Pennsylvania was the only state in the union during my 8 years as governor to make substantial progress on the national test in every subject matter tested and at every grade level tested. The only state in the union. U.S. News and World Report in 2010 ranked us 4th best in the state in public education. And our 8th graders in 2010 came in first in reading on the national test. And when you consider the ESL cities that we have, that's an extraordinary achievement. Extraordinary achievement. So I think we can't go too long without funding those key programs that work without it having an effect. And look, I have been hesitant to criticize Governor Corbett for 2 reasons. One, because I vowed that I would be an ex-governor, much like President George W. Bush has been an ex-president. And I think President Bush has been a great ex-president. He's done wonderful things abroad, wonderful things with his foundation. he's also refrained from criticizing President Obama because he wasn't in a position to help the country and to respond if called on by President Obama. Secondly, Governor Corbett is doing exactly what he told you he would do. And he's no wuss. He told you that he signed a no-tax pledge. You should have, you being Republican, you should have understood what that meant. It was clear as the nose on your face. It meant everything, including education, would be cut and cut severely. And the governor is just doing what he said he would do on transportation, on education. He is not providing funding because it would mean raising some revenue. Although the one thing that I would be critical of everyone in Harrisburg about is you should not be cutting K through 12 education when you put $400 million in a rainy day fund. I think the decline in test scores show that it's pouring in Pennsylvania right now. Pouring, not just raining, but pouring.
Would you like to assess the performance of the legislature coming up on the closure of the session, particularly with some major issues apparently not going that won't be dealt with this fall? That is pension and transportation, two things left over from your administration.
I think they performed exactly as they did when I was governor. No, I actually give the legislature some credit for putting additional funding in both higher ed and K through 12. That was a very positive step, and not an easy step for a Republican legislature to do that in the face of a Republican governor's budget. So on that, I would give them some strong marks. I hope that on energy, people like Chris Ross, who helped me get a lot of our energy initiatives through, I hope the legislature will pass a renewed and strengthened alternative energy portfolio standards and some other new environmental legislation that will help both our economy and our environment.
What advice would you share with the governor to solving the pension crisis?
Well, I think that we put in place changes in the benefit structure and the terms of pensions for new employees while I was governor. I think the only thing that remains to be done, and I say this reluctantly because our public workers didn't cause this crisis, but I think we've got to get a greater contribution from all of our public workers. That's just a fact of life. And I think the governor has to work hard to achieve that.
There have been a growing number of distressed school districts. I guess we could add to that distressed cities. Is it local leadership that would be considered a wuss in your wussy behavior in your estimation, or does the state need to step in and help?
Well, I don't know enough about each individual case to determine who's a wuss and who's not a wuss. And believe it or not, I want to spend the rest of my life on this earth deciding who's a wuss and who's not.
I think you set yourself up for that.
But look, everyone's got to do more. Everyone's got to do more. It's incumbent on local government. It's incumbent on local school districts. It's incumbent on state government, county government. We've got to continue to save money. We've got to continue to save money. And there are ways to find money to be saved. We've got to continue to be more productive. We've got to look at work rules that cause a greater expense to the taxpayers. We've got to find ways to eliminate waste. We can do that. We can do that. In Philadelphia, I took office in the midst of a horrible recession and we were losing a horrible budget deficit, and we were able to, in less than 18 months, take $250 million out of the cost of the operation of the budget without raising any new revenue. In Pennsylvania, we did raise revenue my first year as governor significantly, but we also, over the course of 8 years, took nearly $2 billion out of the operating cost of the government. If you examine GGO, General Government Operations, in the 2010 budget, you will find that GGO spending was less than it was in 2002, the year before I became governor. Less not adjusted for inflation, less in raw numbers, because we took every nickel of waste we could find and were productive and did things on a private sector basis, things like sourcing our purchasing. Just by sourcing our purchasing, We took $360 billion out of the cost of acquiring goods and services on an annual basis for the Commonwealth. So every local government has to do that. I remember my first year as governor, I got a call from Ken Jaron, who was my appointed chair of the SHEED system, and he said the system has come in for a budget that calls for an 11.4% increase in tuition. And I said, what? He said, inflation's under 3%. How could that be? And I attended the next board meeting, and I told the university presidents that they had to, in fact, find ways to save money. And we had them source their purchasing. We got ESCOs for them, checked every building for energy costs, etc. We helped them find ways to eliminate waste. And over 8 years, we kept our increases for SHEED under the rate of inflation. And I think for that 8-year period, we were the second lowest tuition increase of any state system in the country. You can do it. You can do it. Sometimes it's so easy to raise tuition. It's also easy to raise taxes compared to the hard work that it takes to find every work rule that has to be changed, everything that can be done more productively and save money, elimination of waste. But it has to be done. So our local governments and our school districts can't just, rule what's happening from Harrisburg. They've got to take some responsibility for themselves. Governor Corbett's right when he says the state relators have to find ways to save money and hold tuition down. And there's easily, just based on my experience with SHEED, there are ways for universities and colleges to find to save money. And Governor Corbett's absolutely right to insist on that.
You told John Fund that Philadelphia was a, quote, yeasty election system where the law is not always followed, quote. Is there vote fraud where the law is not always followed?
The first part.
Yeasty?
Yeasty. I don't think I've ever said the word yeasty.
Okay, so the heart of the question here is there vote fraud in Philadelphia?
Well, there was absentee ballot fraud, obviously, serious absentee ballot fraud in the Wisconsin election. Several people went to jail over that, and the election was thrown out by a federal judge. There is almost no ballot fraud that I've had experience with. I've been running or supervising elections in Philadelphia for 34 years, where someone impersonates another voter at the polls. If there's fraud, it's absentee ballot fraud. Ironically, the voter ID law does nothing to stop absentee ballot. You can file absentee ballot without proving, your ID at all. So the law, look, we owe a debt of gratitude towards a wonderful legislator and tremendously fair and magnanimous person, State Representative Mike Terzon, because he did a very courageous thing. He told the truth. He told the truth. They didn't pass that law to prevent voter fraud. The Attorney General couldn't produce one case in the consent decree, one case of voter fraud. This type of voter fraud. They couldn't cite one case. Representative Terzon, again, just a magnificent performance, honesty, and openness and transparency in government. Representative Terzon told us right what it was all about, to make it easier for Governor Romney to carry the state. Does anybody doubt that that's true? I mean, Mike Terzon is one of the most honest and courageous and wonderful persons that I've ever met in my experience in government. He tells the truth. You agree with me, right?
You said when you left office that was it for you.
No.
But as far as the office.
You don't agree with me?
Oh.
Representative Terzon?
Being honest? Let's move on. Is there? You said when you left office that was it for you as far as elected office. Now you say you miss it. Is there any public office that interests you at this point?
Is there any post that, well, emperor? Maybe. There is no public office that I'd be interested in. I couldn't be a legislator. It's too slow paced. You need too many people to agree with you. Couldn't do it. And there were no executive positions. I mean, I've said before, I have no interest in running for president because I don't want to spend 3 years in New Hampshire and Iowa. No offense to the United States or the Buckeye State, but it's just, you know. Chris Matthews once asked me that, and I said the same thing. He said, "Are you saying that you don't want to be president?" I said, "Chris, I didn't say that. I said I don't want to run for president. If I woke up tomorrow and found I was president, I wouldn't have resigned." In terms of the only other office, it has some level of attraction, vice president. The attraction of vice president is it's a 9-week campaign. You don't have to raise money. All the money is raised. You win. You get a very nice house in Naval Observatory. It's beautiful. You don't do a lot. It certainly won't tax your health. I mean, you know, but as I've said before, a presidential candidate would have to be crazy to get someone like me for vice president.
Well, I guess that leads into the next question, which is Clinton, Rendell in 2016.
Well, I say in the book, and I've said it publicly, and many of you heard me say that, I think Hillary Clinton would make an absolutely superb president of the United States. I believe that in 2008, and her service as our Secretary of State has only reinforced that. She's been a brilliant Secretary of State. I don't know how many people saw the press conference she gave right after the assaults on our embassy. It was about an hour or two before President Obama's press conference. And President Clinton was just spectacular. She was almost breathtaking in her response to that crisis. And when she turned and when it was over and walked away from the podium, all you can say is, wow, you know, that's more leader. And I always believe that, but boy, her performance as Secretary of State has made me want to help her get elected president in 2016 more than ever. I truly believe she doesn't want to be president right now, doesn't want to run for president. She's very, very tired, beat up in many ways. The job of Secretary of State is by far the most physically demanding job in our government. I will tell you a story that she was honored by the George Marshall Society, and they sent me a ticket. It was complimentary, so I decided to go. And I got there late, probably no surprise to the press corps here. I got there late, so I couldn't see Hillary at the reception, but I walked up to the head table and I started chatting with her, and I said, "Hillary," I said, "do I look to you like someone who has the stamina and the energy to run for president?" And she was taken aback a little bit, and she said, "Oh, of course you do. You look wonderful." And I said, "Well, I'm exactly the age that you will be in 2016. And she laughed and got a big kick out of it. And apparently the next morning I heard from Cheryl Mills, and she came in and told her staff that story. I think if she rests up for a year and a half or so, I think just the fact that the country still will be facing enormous challenges, the lure of being the first woman president in the history of the United States, I'm hoping will be too great for her to resist, and I would aid her in any way that I could to be elected president.
I think we'll close on an Eagles question. We have several of them. Will Michael Vick make it through the season without getting hurt, and will the Eagles make the playoffs?
Well, it's hard to answer the second one, yes, without the first one, yes. I think when Jason Peters went down, it was more debilitating to the Eagles' long-run chances than anybody thought. And he was our best of our 5 offensive linemen. Jason Kelsey was probably our second best, and because of the importance of the center in the offensive scheme, clearly the second is the severest loss, and lost them both. And I'm not sure we can protect Michael Vick. I will tell you one thing I would do, and I said it last night on the show, is I would roll Michael Vick out more. In the pocket, he's a sitting duck with this offensive line. When he rolls out, and he's got some momentum going, where he's running at, if not full speed, at a decent pace, he can run away from those rushers. He can run downfield and gain yardage. He also throws very well when he rolls out, because he is short. He's really no more than 5'11". And it's tough for him to see over incoming linemen in the pocket. When he rolls out, he has a much clearer view. And it also makes a difficult choice for defensive backs whether to stay back and continue to guard our receiver, or whether to come up and try to stop him from rolling off a big game on the ground. So I'd like to see him get out of the pocket more. I know there's always been this emphasis on trying to get into a pocket passer. But if you look at 2010, the year that he had a sensational year and came in second in the MVP voting, you'll find in almost every game he had 20-yard runs, 30-yard runs, 40-yard runs. He ran the ball on set plays a lot more than he's been doing. And that's the only way. If we keep him in the pocket with our offensive line, he is going to get killed. I mean, he got hit 20 times in this game according to statistics. You saw some of those hits where his head was thrust into the ground. I don't know whether he's going to make it. If he doesn't make it, we're in trouble. And you know, he's not a perfect quarterback by all means, but he gives us the best chance to win. It was a bad day for Pennsylvania sports Sunday. Of course, the Steelers blew a lead against the Raiders. The Pirates and the Phillies pretty much cemented the fact that they're not going to be in postseason baseball. And you know, it's heartbreaking for all of our teams. The Pirates, I would say, is the most heartbreaking of all. They've had a terrific season. They gave their fans real reason to hope, not only this year, but for the future. And it seemed for a while absolutely certain that they would break their 19-year run of sub-500 seasons, but with the sort of breakdown at the end, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that. It's a shame. The Pirates have a good young nucleus, and let's hope for the best. And I still root for the Pirates and Steelers when they're not playing the Philly team.
Well, thank you, Governor Rendell, for joining us today.